Okay. All right. So let's get started right with this. So I just things that I'm sure you probably know, but we go through it anyway. So bear with me for the first couple of slides. So just so that you a reminder that the League of Women Voters does not support or oppose candidates or political parties, but it does obviously encourage active participation in government and the understanding of policy issues. There are actually two branches of the League. One is education and the other is advocacy. And we're
And could you speak a little
dealing.
bit louder? Just a
Oh,
touch
sure.
louder. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Actually, well, I'll move up a little bit. So I'm speaking to you today through the education part. So as at the education, I will not be in any way saying what one should or should not do with any of the propositions. If you're interested in the advocacy part, you can go on to the League of Women Voters California website, and they do, in fact, have positions on the positions, at least some of them.
Oh, I thought it was working.
Okay, so,
You can go there. I can't see.
okay,
If you
people
are
could
not
just
on mute,
put them on mute.
that's what I'm going to
Yeah,
do.
if you,
Well, I'm gonna move to the.
I'm muting everyone.
Screen.
okay, thank you.
Oh.
Okay, so again, a little bit of a review. What are ballot propositions? They're obviously proposed laws presented to the public. They make new laws, they change existing laws. They can change the California Constitution, which a couple of our propositions this time do, or they could issue bonds, and we're not issuing any bonds in these propositions today. They're placed on the ballot either by a collection of enough voters, which is generally the 8% of the votes in the last election, or by the state lawmakers. And we will go through how each of these are on the ballot also. And I'm sure, as you also know, that all ballot propositions require a 50% yes vote to pass. So when we're evaluating our ballot propositions, there are things for us to ask ourselves. Is it too complex for a yes or no answer? I think earlier a comment was made about, you read over the proposition several times and you're not really sure if you're answering yes is going to happen or not. So hopefully we'll clarify some of that today. Is it really a solution to a problem, or is it maybe a problem to a problem? Is it well written? And we talk about this multiple times, but who is paying for it? The whole idea of, we have at the end of this slide, follow the money. One of the propositions I think you're going to find is particularly interesting in this way, that it appears to be one way, but when you look at who's following the money, you kind of question the whole proposition. So again, does it create new problems? Does it restrict the state budget, which one of our propositions does? Does it change the Constitution, which a couple of them will? So who is really supporting or opposing it? Again, it's follow the money. And just a reminder that everything you're going to get from all of the advertising and everything else is just advertising. The State Legislative Analyst Office is the gospel on this. And so our presentation is based on information from them, and also from a group called Ballotpedia, which again is an unbiased group, which is giving information. And both of those can be found online if you're interested in learning more about it. And the only other fact on this part is just a reminder that initiatives can only be amended with another initiative. So the legislature cannot do anything about the initiative once it's in place. We have 7 propositions, and I'm going to go quickly through this part because we're going to talk about it more as we talk about each proposition. But Proposition 1 is a constitutional amendment. And if a constitutional amendment is passed and subsequently there's a desire to revoke it, it can only be done by another ballot initiative. And in this case, so a yes vote is going to say to change the Constitution, and a no vote is to say to leave it the way it is. Propositions 26 and 27 are combined. They are both an initiated constitutional amendment and a state statute, which is interesting because in this case, they have both been put on the ballot by signatures. As I said, the 8% of the votes cast in the last gubernatorial election. Propositions 28, 29, and 30 are initiatives. Again, a yes would support the proposition and a no vote is to leave it the way things are. And Proposition 31 is a referendum. So this one's a little different in that the legislature actually passed a law and immediately a referendum was filed, which meant that that law is not being enacted at this time and can only be enacted if Proposition 31 passes. So that's our kind of general information. Let's go on now to the very first one. Proposition 1, the Right to Reproductive Freedom Amendment of 2022. And this one was placed on the ballot by the legislature. So when you see the proposition, that's what this part says right up here. The question is pretty basic. Should the California Constitution expressly provide that the state of California shall not deny or interfere with an individual's reproductive freedom in their most intimate decisions, including the right to choose to have an abortion and their right to choose or refuse contraception? The way it is now is that abortion is currently legal up to the viability, and by viability, that's the point in gestation when a fetus can survive outside of the womb. And it is legal only after viability if the patient's life or health is at risk. So the interesting is that much of the constitutional amendment does not change either of these two things. But under California law right now, minors can access reproductive freedom, healthcare, obtain birth control, and receive abortion services without either parent notification or permission. And that, as I said, does not change. But what it would do is it would amend the Constitution to establish a right to reproductive freedom as defined to include a right to an abortion and to choose or refuse contraception. What the amendment states is that the state is kept from denying or interfering with an individual's reproductive rights, including the fundamental rights of the abortion and to choose or refuse contraception. It is stating that this is a right. That is the difference. It doesn't change what is already allowed, but it makes it a right. So it specifies that this constitutional amendment is intended to further the constitutional right of privacy and the right not to be denied equal protection. Specifies that nothing contained in the measure narrows or limits the right to privacy. So it is a privacy issue that is the paragraph that is being added into the Constitution. The question always comes up about budget. So is there a budget impacts on this? And basically, the LAO says there's no direct budget impact unless a court finds that the proposition extends existing rights. So right now, California provides health care to many low-income Californians, mostly through Medi-Cal. Now, health services are covered in Medi-Cal both on federal and state levels, and federal covers a lot of the contraception. California Medi-Cal covers the abortion part. And also, there are about 2 million Californians who buy health insurance through Covered California. And under the Covered California rules, it is about the same. So that the state and the federal both cover that. The federal covers most of the contraception issues. And again, the state through the Covered California covers most of the abortions. So what do the supporters say? So Governor Newsom has a quote that California will not sit on the sidelines as unprecedented attacks on the fundamental right to choose endanger women across the country. and the measure will ensure that women in our state have an inviolable right to a safe and legal abortion. And there are other, obviously, supporters to this. And some of the key organizations are listed here: the Planned Parenthood, California Federation of Teachers, the ACLU, the Teachers Association. And they have raised a little over, and this was checked on Friday, a little over $3 million to support the proposition. So then the question becomes, what do the opponents say? And the opponents are, I think, what we would expect: the Roman Catholic bishop, who's stating that the state's political leadership continues to stubbornly cling to the practice of abortion and the throwaway culture, and the language is overly vague and reckless. The key organizations are the California Conference of Catholic Bishops, the Republican Party, and Democrats for Life. What is interesting, and we note money on all propositions, and on this one, as of Friday, the total money raised to oppose this proposition has been zero. So what does it mean? So if you vote yes on Proposition 1, then the California Constitution is going to be changed to expressly include the existing rights of reproductive freedom. I want to emphasize existing rights. And if the California is not changed, then those existing rights would not be included in the Constitution. Right now, states have more flexibility based on the recent Supreme Court laws to allow, limit, or ban abortion. Federal law protects rights to contraception, but as you know, the US Supreme Court has found that abortion is no longer a federal right. The California Constitution guarantees everyone the right to privacy, but does not define what that right includes, and that is what the intent of this paragraph is. State law places some restrictions on abortion. Because of the way California courts have interpreted the right to privacy, the state can only restrict abortions when needed to meet certain state interests, such as public health and safety. For example, California law requires abortion providers to be licensed. In addition, abortions can only be performed on a viable fetus if the pregnancy puts the health or life of the person who is pregnant at risk. Under state law, a fetus, as I said earlier, is considered viable if they are able to survive outside the womb. So if you have any questions on that one, you can put them in the chat or prepare to ask me later. Let's go on to Proposition 26. Proposition 26 and 27 are very closely aligned, and I'm going to talk about first 26 and then 27, and then do a little comparison of both. They're both gambling ballots, and it's going to be their combined initiative. As you can see up here, they're combined a constitutional amendment and a statute. And they were both, as I said, placed on the ballot by that 8% of the population signing for them to be on the ballot. So the question of 26 is, should California increase the allowable gambling activities, specifically at American Indian-owned casinos, and allow sports betting at the casinos and horse racing tracks? But basically, it's only 4 horse racing tracks that they are referring to. So state law currently bans sports betting, roulette, and dice games. In the 2018 Supreme Court, they overturned the federal ban on sports betting, so allowed states to legalize, and many states now do. 35 states, in fact, but not California. In addition, roulette and dice games are currently illegal at tribal casinos. In 1987, the Supreme Court decided in a 6-3 vote that neither the state of California nor Riverside County could regulate the bingo and card games of some of the casinos run by the Indian tribes. The ruling was known as the Cabazon decision, and it set in motion a series of federal and state actions, including 2 ballot propositions that were done that dramatically expanded tribal casino operations in California. What California does allow, other than what we have said here, is horse race betting in 4 casinos. And the tribal casinos, there are 66 that are allowed in 28 different counties operated by 63 different tribes. And there's a tribal state pact that allows slot machines and other games at the casinos. So what would Proposition 26 do? It would legalize sports betting at Indian gaming casinos and those licensed racetracks. It would define sports betting as wagering on professional, college, or amateur athletic events. It would not include sports betting of high school sports and events featuring California college teams. It is defining sports betting as wagering. It enacting a 10% tax on sports betting profits at the 4 racetracks, obviously after payments are made for any wins, of which 70% would go to the general fund, 15% each to address problem gambling and enforcement. And as it says, legalized roulette and dice games at the tribal casinos. So there is that 15% that would go is to go to the California Department of Health for researching, developing, and implementing programs for problem gambling prevention and mental health and providing grants to local governments to address gambling and mental health. 15% would also go to the Bureau of Gambling Control for enforcing and implementing sports wagering and other forms of gambling throughout the state. And the way this is calculated in the way as there is a minimum amount of spending on K-12 schools and community colleges called Prop 98, which we're going to talk about again in the later one. And the money that comes into this would impact that Prop 98 money in that it would increase it. So what about the budget impacts? That's important. So increased state revenues from payments by sports wagering facilities are going to be estimated at tens of millions of dollars annually. There would, of course, be state regulatory cost increases in the low tens of millions. There would be increased state enforcement costs, also to exceed several $million. But what the estimate is of the LAO is that most of the costs would be covered by increased revenues and reimbursements, and that they're anticipating that there would be increased revenues. So what do the supporters say? The supporters say that this is going to continue the 20-year legacy of allowing closely regulated gaming to support American Indian economies. And it's the most responsible approach to authorizing sports wagering, and it would promote American Indian self-reliance. The 24 American Indian tribes are supporting this, and they are very specific, and there's a group that says yes on 26, no on 27, because they believe that there is a difference and they want to have 26 passed. And they have raised a little over $73 million to support Proposition 26. So what do the opponents say? They say it would massively expand gambling in California, and they say it was just for the benefit of the large tribal casinos, and it would leave casino workers unprotected from worker safety, wage and hour harassment, and anti-discrimination laws. There are 6 casinos and gaming establishments that are against this, and some of the unions, and they have raised up to $42 million. And some of those unions, by the way, are the Bicycle Casino Union, the Hawaiian Gardens Casino Union, and a couple of the others. So what will your vote be? So a yes vote supports this ballot initiative. It would make legalized sports betting allowable at the casinos. as well as the 4 licensed racetracks. It would determine how a tax for those sports betting at the racetracks, and it would legalize roulette, dice games, and craps at the tribal casinos. And obviously, a no vote would mean that none of this could happen and things would stay the way they currently are. So as you can see, Proposition 27 is also to legalize sports betting. And they have added onto this and revenue for homelessness prevention fund initiative. But the real question of this is, should California allow online and mobile sports betting for people 21 years of age or older? The way it is now, the same as backup information is just as what I described earlier about the 2018 Supreme Court ruling that did allow this to happen. And in June of 2022, sports betting was legal, or laws to legalize it had been approved in 35 of the states and the District of Columbia. But California currently does not allow this to happen. So what would it do? It would establish a state-regulated online sports gambling platform in partnership with gaming tribes or qualified gaming companies. The revenues from the online sports betting and related taxes, licensing fees, and penalties, some portions of this revenue would reflect a shift from other existing state and local revenues. The 10% for gambling, 85% of the money from taxes and fees would go to a group that is not currently in existence, the California Solutions to Homelessness and Mental Health Support Account. And the remaining 15% would go to the Tribal Economic Development Account. Gambling on youth sports would be prohibited, and a proposition would create a division of online sports betting control within the Department of Justice. So in other words, new entities to control all of this. So what the budget impact for Prop 27? It does increase state revenues, again, potentially from the hundreds to the millions, up to maybe 500 million a year. And it would also increase costs, reaching into the tens of millions. And again, most of the costs would be offset by the increased revenues so that there would be increased revenue. The question really is there a difference between, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, I missed one. So what do the supporters say? So basically the supporters say because it is going to generate millions of dollars and it's going to benefit every tribe, and the supporters are clearly this group, the Californians for Solution to Homelessness and Mental Health Support, and some of the other gambling. By the way, the BetMGM, the Betfair Interactive, and the Crown Gambling none of those are in California. All of them are from other states. And they have raised a little over $100 million to pass this initiative. So what do the opponents say? They say it is deceptive measure promoted by out-of-state companies to legalize online and mobile sports gambling. It would cause a massive explosion of gaming, directly undercutting tribal sovereignty. And it would actually increase homelessness, not prevent it or anything, by allowing more people to be addicted to gambling. And again, these are the groups that are in opposition to California tribal sovereignty. 2 unions, the California Teachers Union and Communication Workers. And both the California Democratic Party and the California Republican Party are against this proposition. And they have raised approximately $114 million. A number of, again, Chamber of Commerce's, the California Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce, the American Indian Chamber of Commerce, the California Black Chamber of Commerce, the California Coalition for Rural Housing, the Los Angeles Urban League, just to name a few. So Proposition 27, yes or no? So a yes legalizes online and mobile sports gambling, and a vote opposes this. So let's talk for a minute about those 4 stars there and what happens if, excuse me, if they both pass. But let's look at the comparison first. So as a very simple comparison here, Proposition 26 was initiated by the California Indian casinos. Proposition 27 was initiated by major sportsbook non-gaming tribes. Proposition 26 allows in-person sports betting on tribal lands. Proposition 27 allows online sports betting over internet outside of tribal lands. Proposition 26 has the percent of any profits go to the general fund. And Proposition 27 has the profits going to the homelessness crisis and 15% to the non-gaming tribes. So the big question that people are asking is this: what happens if they both pass? So if both Propositions 26 and 27 pass, it is possible that both can take effect. It is also possible that if some provisions conflict and a court finds that they conflict, then the court can say that one proposition, and it would be the one of the two that has the most votes, goes into effect and the other one does not. So again, so if both propositions pass, then the one who has the most votes goes into effect if there is no conflict. But we don't know what the courts are going to say. Now, what the Proposition 27 writers have done is they have actually written into their measure a provision that says, and this is quotes, "We, the people of California, declare that Proposition 27 does not conflict with Proposition 26. So they are saying that if both propositions pass, both can take effect. That doesn't mean that they would. And if they both pass, it is very likely that there is going to be some kind of lawsuit about this, and then it's up to the courts. And the courts will do an independent analysis about whether the provisions can be operational together or whether implementing one would get in the way of implementing the other. And if a court finds that they are in conflict, whichever one gets the most votes will be the one that takes effect. If the court finds that they're complementary and they don't conflict, then they both take effect. Kind of an interesting conundrum there. Okay, we're now on Proposition 28. And this, when I said we were talking about Proposition 98, which is a funding one, that comes into effect here again, because this provides additional funding for arts and music education in the public schools. And as it says, the question basically is, should California provide additional funding that is specified for arts and education in the public schools? So the way it is now is that back in 1988, California approved Proposition 98 by a fairly small margin, and it has been amended by the state constitution to make sure that the schools, the public schools, have a percentage of the state budget on a yearly basis. And what it does is it increases that amount based on the income from the last year. So Proposition 98 did establish 2 formulas. The first one was the base rate, and the second one is the adjustment. Currently, though, the state does not require local education agencies to provide education in the arts or music in elementary or middle schools. The state does fund before and after school and summer programs that does require some of the arts and music education. The state also sets a minimum course completion requirement for high schools that include just 1 year of visual or performing arts, a foreign language, or career technical education. So what would Prop 28 do? It would require a minimum source of annual funding for K-12 public schools, including charter schools, to fund arts education programs. the minimum amount by law would be 1% of the total state and local revenues that local agencies received under Prop 98. But it would be in addition to it, not part of. According to the LAO, the ballot initiative would likely result in increased spending of $800 million to $1 billion each fiscal year. The budget impact, as I said, it would increase the spending, and not additional income coming from any other place, but from the general fund. So what do supporters say? Supporters say that California is leading the Vote Arts and Minds campaign to support the initiative. The initiative is timely as our country seeks to create a more just and equitable future, and having arts and music education is necessary for our schools. There have been a couple of major donors, so we've listed them because of the amount. They're Austin Butner, who was the prior LAUSD superintendent, and Steve Palmer, the LA Clippers owner, and they have raised about $8 million. What this declares is that there has to be a dedicated teacher. And right now, there is only 1 in 5 public schools in California that actually has arts education. And what this also allows for is more than just arts and music, but programs such as dance, theater, computer graphics, animation, coding, costume design, filmmaking, any of those would fall under this proposition. California Teachers Association and most of the other educational groups are in support of this proposition. And the money raised total is a little over $8 million. The opponents say that they oppose this because it requires an annual source of funding in addition of that 1% to the Prop 98. And at this time, there is no money being spent, as you can see, 0. And there's been very little said against it. I think one of the things that we did find outside of our usual sources came from the Los Angeles Times editorial board, and that the board said in quotes, "This is a bad idea. Right now, state coffers are flush, but when revenue becomes tight in the future, the governor and the legislature need as much flexibility in the budget as possible to make sure that critical needs are funded. What happens if the student population plummets in future years while the number of disabled elderly people grows?" So, because that 1% would be coming out of the general fund. So Proposition 28, yes or no? A yes vote supports the ballot initiative to have the 1% of the state total revenues under Proposition 98 go to arts education. It would require schools of 500 or more to use 80% of the funding to employ teachers and 20% for the materials. And a no vote basically says things will stay as they are. Proposition 29 is on dialysis. And since all of us, I think that I have seen online and in the room, have been around here for a while, will have noted that we're going to say, wait a minute, didn't we have a proposition on dialysis already? And we have had several of them. So we're going to talk about that. The question that has been raised on this one is that should the state require on-site at the dialysis centers a licensed medical professional in kidney dialysis clinics and establish other state requirements? The other state requirements are reporting requirements of who owns the facility, any kinds of problems within the facility, and prohibits clinics from refusing care due to the form of payment. In other words, if someone is paying under Medi-Cal or Medicare or another insurance, could they be denied? So that is part of the state requirements. The way it is now, yes, medical staff evaluates the services provided and makes recommendations. There is a required experience of care. A board certified physician needs to be part of the clinic, but not at all present. A registered nurse, again, does not need to be present. There's usually a dietitian and social workers that help. But most of the care for a patient who has end-stage renal disease and is getting dialysis is from their primary physicians and their staff. In 2018, the campaign Californians for Kidney Dialysis Patient Protection supported a ballot initiative to require dialysis clinics to issue refunds to patients if they got over 115% of the actual cost. And this was rejected by the voters. In 2020, there was another initiative. That one was requiring a minimum of 1 licensed physicians present at the clinic. It had the other same requirements as this one, the reporting data of dialysis related infections, letting the patients know who actually owns the clinic, etc. And this was also rejected by the voters. There is definitely a conflict between the unions who put this initiative on the ballot and the owners of the clinics. DaVita and Fresenius loom large on proposition, and they have been fighting with the unions about organizing for years. So what would Proposition 29 do? What it's different from the past one, is basically the nurse practitioner or physician's assistant. They have added that into the proposition. So they could choose not to have a physician or a nurse, but a nurse practitioner, a physician's assistant with at least 6 months experience to be on site at the kidney dialysis clinic. It does authorize exceptions for staffing shortages if medical professionals are available through telehealth. It requires the clinics to disclose to patients all physicians or other persons with clinic ownership of more than 5%, to report to the state any infection issues, and to require the state to approve any closing or substantially reducing services to their patients at a clinic, and prohibiting them from refusing to treat patients based on payment, as we have said. Budget impact, basically it says that there would be some increased costs to the government monitoring to the low tens of millions of dollars annually. And this is primary, again, due to monitoring whether or not they have a physician or physician's assistant or a nurse practitioner at the clinics. What the supporters say is basically that these two companies, DaVita and Fresenius, are making a great deal of money off of these clinics and really should be required to give better patient service. Right now, the profit margin for DaVita is 16% and Fresenius 15.8%, which is 6 times higher than the average profit margin for any kind of hospital. This has been initiative, as I said, has been put on by the workers, the union, and that the profitability should not impact the quality of care. They, as you can see, what the donors are, and they have raised just under $8 million to support this proposition. The opponents say the voters have rejected Proposition 8 and Proposition 23, and that this one should be rejected also. It is promoted by the patients, doctors, nurses, and dialysis, and the opposing groups, as you can see here, Chamber of Commerce, California Taxpayers Association. The major donors are DaVita and Fresenius. DaVita is a California company, Fresenius is a German company, and they have raised just over $36 million in order to defeat this proposition. So yes or no? Yes is that the kidney dialysis clinics would have new staffing requirements, reporting requirements, ownership disclosure, and closing requirements, all of which are not in place at this time. And no would mean that there'd be no change in how the clinics are run. Proposition 30. Proposition 30 is the Clean Air and Clean Air Act. So here, the question. Shall California provide funding for programs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by increasing tax on personal income over $2 million? So the tax would only affect you if your adjusted gross is over 2 million. So the way it is now, changing climate, a changing climate represents California with 5 key climate hazards. We have higher temperatures and extreme heat waves, which we just experienced, more severe wildfires, which we're experiencing right now, more frequent and intense droughts, which we are experiencing, and flooding due to extreme precipitation, which we are experiencing, and coastal flooding for erosion of sea level. I don't know if any of you have been down over by our coast in Laguna Beach lately, but a lot of the beach is gone at this point. All these events threaten our lives, our health, and our future. Scientists and other experts agree that we need to reduce carbon pollution if we are to avoid the worst effects of climate change. Transportation is California's largest source of greenhouse gas emissions that cause climate change. And the state is heavily dependent on fossil fuels. When fossil fuels are burned, carbon dioxide, methane, and other greenhouse gases are released into the air. The atmosphere acts like a greenhouse, which is why these emissions are called greenhouse gases. These gases also are released during fossil fuels extractions and transportation directly pollutes the air, as we know. So there are challenges to transitioning to electric vehicles. And of course, one of the challenges is the cost of the electric vehicles, as well as charging stations. And although you might not think that charging stations are an issue here in Orange County, if you get out of Orange County, LA, San Diego, finding a charging station can be very difficult. In 2022, California adopted regulations to end the sale of gas-powered cars in California by 2035. In 2021, regulations were adopted requiring about 8% of new cars sold in the state to be zero emission by 2025. And in 2021, regulations were also adopted requiring rideshare companies such as Uber and Lyft to achieve a level of zero greenhouse gas emissions and to ensure 90% of their vehicles are fully electric. So what would Proposition do? They would establish the Clean Cars and Clean Air Trust Fund. The trust fund would be a separate fund from the general fund or any other state or account. And it would fund zero emission vehicles, charging stations, and infrastructure, as well as wildfire prevention actions. And it would require equitable contributions from the state's highest income earners. So that is that amount over the $2 million. How would this money be distributed? 35% of it would go to what is called the Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Investment Fund. It would make refueling more accessible and convenient where people live, work, and play. It would also increase access to disadvantaged low-income and moderate-income communities and passengers. 45% would invest in public outreach and educational funds to ensure that Californians are aware of and educated in how to use these programs. And 25% would go to state and local governments for sufficient firefighting capacity. This would make improvements in wildfire suppression, prevention, mitigation, etc., for a more safer California landscape. And the trust fund itself would have an additional tax of 1.75% on the portion of a taxpayer's taxable income in excess of $2 million. The current rate is 13.3%, and this additional tax would go into effect January 1, 2023. So there is an estimated $3 to $4.5 billion annually for this fund. It would increase state administrative costs, yes, and it would decrease state and local transportation revenue, excuse me, important comment that I didn't say. So what do the supporters say? The supporters say is that we need to step up and protect the health. We need to make sure that the funding is going to come from solely from the 0.1% of the Californians most able to do it, and that this is a Robin Hood kind of ballot measure. The key supporters of all of this are the LIFT, the California Democratic Party, the California State Association of Electrical Workers. Now, out of that $15 million that you see there, almost all of it has been provided by LIFT. And as I'm sure you know, LIFT is one of the car rate companies. So what do the opponents say? The opponents say that, and that Governor Newsom is against this, that we don't need this. We're already giving about $10 billion for electric vehicles in the infrastructure, and that this is a cynical scheme devised by a single corporation, and he is referring here to LIFT, to funnel state income tax revenues to their company. The president of the Howard Jarvis Tax Association also says this is not necessary. We already have the highest taxes in the country. And if these proposals are really priorities, they should be paid for out of the general fund. And the key organizations against it as the California Teachers Association, the Howard Jarvis Group, and as I had pointed out already, Governor Newsom, and they've raised about $8 million for this. So Proposition 30, yes or no? Yes says tax those folks over the 2 million and use this money specifically and earmarked for the zero emission vehicle subsidies, the infrastructure, the charging stations, the wildfire suppression. About no means keep things as they are. The last one, Proposition 31, a referendum. As I said, this is a referendum because there's already a law in place. The 2020 law prohibiting the sale of flavored tobacco products. So this is Senate Bill 793, which was passed in 2020, and that would have banned the sale of flavored products. And the question for this referendum is, should that law be enacted or should it not? So the way it is now, Proposition 793 passed in the Senate with a 34-0 vote with 5 Republicans not voting, and in the House a 58-1 vote with 15 Republicans and 5 Democrats not voting. California would join a growing number of states and cities that have moved to ban flavored tobacco products. Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island have all banned these kinds of flavored products. About 10% of adults and youths use tobacco products, and youths are most likely to use what's called electric nicotine delivery systems, or ENDS, and most ENDS are flavored. Flavored products have been around since 2009, and although flavored cigarettes have been banned, flavored ENDS have not been. And federal law is not making this as a ban either at this point. So sale of these products have been able to be continued while the referendum has been pending. So what would it do? It would ban flavored tobacco products and the enhancers sold both in person and at vending machine. It has specifically carved out certain areas. It does not ban shisha or hookah products, certain premium cigars that are hand rolled or loose leaf tobacco. And there is a penalty per violation against stores and vending machines that would continue to sell these products. There is a budget impact from this. It would decrease revenue because people may stop buying some of the products from tens of millions to 100 million. And it would also have a problem. State taxes raised in 2020 was 2 billion, and those could go down if in fact people stop purchasing the products. However, this may have no impact at all if folks switched from buying the flavored products to non-flavored products. Right now, so that you do know, the tax revenues that are being raised, that part of that $2 billion, 56% goes to healthcare, 21% to early childhood programs, 12% to tobacco control, and 4% to medical research. So what do the supporters say? That big tobacco has been targeting our kids, trying to hook our kids to tobacco products, and that we know that the flavored products are more enticing to younger people. The California to Protect California Kids and the California Teachers Association are supporting this to ban it, and the total money raised is a little bit over $5 million. What the opponents say is that we agree you should never have any access to any tobacco products, much less flavored ones. But by banning the flavored ones, we're taking it away from the millions of adults who choose to use this. So this law goes too far and is unfair. And the prohibition is going to hurt small local businesses and jobs as products are pushed from licensed conscientious dealers to the underground market. And some of the folks against it are the Republican Party, and all the other 4 companies listed there are tobacco companies. And the total that they have raised up to this point is just under $22 million. So the question becomes yes or no. A yes vote means that SB 793 goes into effect, and in-person stores and vending machines can no longer sell flavored tobacco products or tobacco products with flavor enhancers. A no vote means that they can continue doing so. So then the question becomes, how will I remember all this information? Now it is being recorded. I guess you can go back and listen again, but I think there are easier ways to do that. And one of them is certainly to go to the Easy Voter Guide, which is available online. And you can get that by just going onto the League of Women Voters Easy Voter Guide. Or you can go on to Voter's Edge. And again, I think most of you are aware of Voter's Edge, but what I'd like to do is just open it up for a second so that you can see. I believe the zip code here is 92673? Because I want to show you what your ballot looks like. Just 1 second, I apologize for the delay here.
It's 92603 in Irvine, this part of Irvine.
Oh, okay, well, I'm going to do 92337 just because it's, I think that's Laguna Woods. So, whoops. Oh, 926, yes, my error. What immediately is going to pop up is with your ballot. So everyone that is here for the senator, click that off because we're not, the districts. And right now, they are just uploading all the information on here about each of the candidates. Everything has gone out to them and the candidates are responding. If the candidate was in the primary, then their information may already be on here. But if we go on to measures, it pops up immediately with each of these. And so it gives you a little bit of information. And if you go into
Anne, you are
yes,
we don't see the website. You see it
Oh,
on
it
your
didn't come
computer.
up.
Isn't it? What you
Okay,
have to
all
do
right.
is on the share, click on the website, click share again, go to the
Okay, well,
website.
actually, what I'm going to do is I won't do that. Good point. Thank you. Then let's not worry about that because I'm going to show you a couple of the pages anyway. So this is the page I was just showing you. All right. So you can go on once you put in your zip code, it will give you your entire ballot. But when you go over here to measures, it will give you the information specific about it. You click the learn more, and that takes care of that. And it will give you all the information that we have been sharing. So it gives you what is the proposal? What if it passes? What does that mean? It gives you what is a yes vote and what is a no vote. And I think maybe in some ways, this is one of the most important things right there, because I think that becomes the confusing part with propositions. If I vote yes, what's going to happen? So